Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mom's Corner. My name is Zainab. I am your host for today. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who are regulars on Mom's Corner, thank you so much for coming every time we have a session. We really appreciate it. For those who are new here, which I see a lot of different names on my screen, or welcome. Thank you for being here, and I hope that we can see you for future sessions. Before we proceed, just a reminder for the stipend link, I will share that at the end of the meeting today, so stay tuned for that. So please make sure the name on your screen reflects the one that we'll be sending the stipend to, so we have the right person. And if you need help in doing that, I can certainly help you with that as well. Let me see. Please don't be shy. This is a community space. It's judgment-free zone, so any and all questions are welcomed and encouraged. So please ask away. A brief introduction of Mom's Corner. Mom's Corner is one of the many programs under the umbrella of Global Perinatal Services, or GPS. And GPS is a nonprofit organization, and we are doing some really impactful work in many communities. Our organization's mission is to provide perinatal support services that include doula services, lactation education, childbirth education, early parenting support, and child development. And the communities that we provide those services are marginalized communities, which include Black, immigrant, refugee families. And Mom's Corner is not just space for moms, but for all women folks, and almost all women folk and supporters of women. Because at GPS, we believe that motherhood is an extension of a woman's identity and not the definition. So Mom's Corner, since the pandemic, as you all know, has become not just a space where we come together to find empathy, support, and camaraderie, but a safe haven and access to so many critical resources in our communities. We will have question and answer at the end of the session, but I think Omi also to do her own thing, so I'll let that happen as well. If you have any questions, like I said, in the chat box or raising your hand, any way you want to do that is fine with me. And as I mentioned, we are so grateful and honored to have Sister Umi Hussein, the founder of the nonprofit Garabsi, and which is an advocacy organization that supports Muslims with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families in the greater Seattle area. She's a well-known community member, so I'm sure she's not a stranger to many of you here today. And we also have other community advocates on disability on the call today, which I'm hoping to really talk to and see what amazing and impactful work that they're doing. So I will stop rambling, and without further ado, hand it over to Sister Umi. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon on a Saturday afternoon, which I know it's really hard. So I really appreciate you guys coming in and having this important conversation and talking about this important topic. As Zainab said, my name is Umi. I run a nonprofit organization called Garabsi, which basically is a Somali word that stands for like lending support, lending a hand. And I'll talk more about the organization that we run. So really just a disclosure, I'm getting over a cold, so if I have to pause to cough, I apologize. I have to do that here and there, but hopefully not. But thank you. I will share my screen and then we can go into details about who we are and what we do. And then as Zainab said, it would be great to save questions towards the end so we can utilize a lot of the time to cover the topic. But if you need clarification on anything, just let me know. And I will mainly be communicating in English. But if someone needs clarification in Somali, which is my second language, first language, but second language, I guess, I can do that as well. But most of the communication will be in English so that we're inclusive. So I will share my screen really quick and we can get started. You can hear me okay? I know I tested that out with Christina, but I want to make sure.
Yes. Yep.
There's no guidebook for all the different problems that could arise in our lives.
Okay, so once I start presenting, I don't think I can see the chat. Oh, we have the same issue again. 1 second, and let me stop sharing.
Yes, I'll keep an eye on the chat for you. Don't worry.
Okay. So present. I did that. Sorry, we just fixed this and now we are having technical issues. So let's try this again. Oops. Have to close out and start again. If I can't share, if it's okay with you, Zainab, would you mind? I don't want that to take up too much time.
Yes. Yep. What would you like to do?
Let me try one more time, and if I can, I'll let you just share your screen.
And last time we just, yep, present, there you go.
I did that, and
Yep.
then but now it's working perfect. All right.
Yes. I
Thank
can
you. Thank you everyone for your patience. Again, as I said, my name is Umi, and for today we will talk about who we are and what we do, what is a disability and why it matters, building awareness in our communities, and then we will talk specifically for parents who may have children who they suspect that they might need some assistance. We'll talk a little bit about early intervention before we wrap up. So my name again is Umi. I am a community member. I grew up in Seattle. And I majored in psychology with the focus of working with families who have children with disability, children and disability, intellectual and developmental disability to be specific. And my partner, who is not able to join us today, she also is a public health major and a minor in global health. And being the oldest of 9 children in her family, she took a lot of responsibility helping her mother with her brother, who she shares his name. So that's public disclosure from her end. So his name is Muhammad Amin, who has Down syndrome. And so she knows firsthand about what it's like as a family member navigating community and supports and services in general. So her joining GetUpC that was her drive, is to close that gap for our community, for our families, and the disparities that we have seen throughout the years. So myself, I have been in this field working in different settings for the past 15 plus years. And so this is work that I'm really not only passionate about, but I feel is my life purpose. And what drove me to start GetUpC is just seeing the lack of support, understanding, the lack of education in our communities, specifically in the East African community, the Somali community. And it was about time that we started bringing more awareness to this topic, because disability affects, and we'll talk more about this, but disability affects all of us in some ways or another. And for so long, it has been a topic that has been a taboo. And I really would like, and I'm seeing it, but I would love to see a shift away from that stigma and move towards creating a more accessible and inclusive environment and society for our families and individuals with all types of disabilities. And so that's what drives our work. It's family-centered, it's family-focused. And we let the families tell us what they want, and we support them with what they want. Everybody is different, and everybody's where they are in their journey is different. So we could have families come to us who recently got diagnosed, or families who've had children who have been diagnosed for a while. And so the families that we support vary, but most of the families that we have seen since we established few years ago is families with children. And the struggle we've seen mostly has been in the school system. To my surprise, because I mostly work with adults, and I think my slide is a little slow here. You guys only see the first screen, yeah?
Yes.
I have moved away from that screen. So I think I might have you present. Resume share.
Did you try clicking the bottom 1 out of 20? One that,
Yeah, so for me, my screen is going, but I see that it's not moving for you guys.
okay.
So
Maybe go back to your original one where we're able to see everything on your screen, but that's fine if that's okay with you.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, this is where I am right now.
Yeah.
So talked a bit about who I am and who my partner is. So that's an image of Hibble, who I work with, and then talking about the supports that we provide. So we offer one-on-one supports to family. That's our main work that we do, is getting referrals from families, and referrals can come from anybody. It can come from directly from families, friends, specialists. So we've had referrals from doctors. It can come from therapists. So we can get referrals from anybody, and then we will reach out to the families directly and set up a meeting with them. But make sure, if you're sending a referral, though, that they gave permission and they know that we will be contacting them. So that's the one disclaimer. But it can come from anybody, and then we will contact the family and we will sit with them and go through what they need support with, get a bit of a background about their children and there's challenges that they have faced. So we really try to connect with the families at that level so that they can feel comfortable with us. And so we do home visits, or we meet them wherever they are, but most of them have been comfortable with us coming to their homes. So we can do that. We've done educational and training workshops like this, where we do general community workshops through invitations like this. But with family specific workshops, we like to focus on specific topics that families want to learn about. So the special education, especially, since most of the people that we support are children, but also other community services and resources that are available. And then another thing we have is like guardianship. So my background, excuse me, my background is mostly working with adults. And so I'm very familiar with services for adults after they graduate high school. So one of the big things that we get is guardianship. So we help families kind of navigate that and apply for guardianship if their child is not able to advocate for themselves and they need that extra support. And then we just do advocacy all around, like this, building awareness, talking to organizations, going places and seeing, if they have accessibility and how is their inclusion, what programs do they have, can people even come? So just building that awareness just in general and get the conversation going is what we do. And so that's the services that we provide. And our vision, really what drove me is to this drive to see everybody be a part of their community, whether they have a disability or not, because everyone has everyone is a valued member of their community, and people with disabilities, regardless of how severe their disability is, are valued members of their community, and they can contribute as well in some ways to their communities, even if it's just coming in and taking part of activities. It's really, really important. But unfortunately, what happens is that once a family has a child with a disability, or they get diagnosed with a disability, they kind of disappear from their community. So you no longer see them, and they don't have that support that they should be having, like everybody else. Coming from the East African communities and Somali communities, we're really big on, it takes a village to raise a child, but if that child has a disability, all of a sudden it just becomes the parent's responsibility. And so we want to change that. So we do that by our mission, which is making sure that we promote inclusivity, accessibility, but also empower families with the knowledge that they need so they can become stronger advocates themselves. The best thing with working with families is, from the time I work with them to just few sessions, like of me attending sessions with them, like school meetings or things, like you just see the shift when they have that support system and when their voice can be heard. Like all of a sudden, they're more vocal, they're more insistent on what they want. They don't give up. And that's the proudest thing. Like, that's the best thing I could get from this, is just seeing how, parent goes from being very just going with the flow, accepting whatever they're being told, to saying, no, there's something that's going on and I want to know, and what you're doing is not enough. So that's what we want is to create that empowerment in the parents that we're working with. And then creating partnerships and allies with community members and organizations like GPS. Thank you again for inviting me. It's really crucial to further our agenda of making sure that we become an inclusive community at large. So you can contact us by our phone number, email, and I'll share that with Zainab, and Zainab can give that out. And we are not an LLC anymore, so I have to drop that. But so that's how you can contact us. Again, if you know somebody, or if you yourself need support navigating anything, honestly, we can talk about that. That's why we do the home visits, is to hone in on the specific supports that you need. So if there isn't any questions, I don't know if is there any questions or anybody needing clarity on what I've said so far?
I just wanted to follow up on the education piece for families. Do you kind of like go to schools and provide that kind of education to families? Because I know a lot of our families who kind of are shy away from, or don't want to, reveal that they have children with disability, or maybe they're diagnosed, and like you said, all of a sudden the family disappears from the community. Do you go to the schools to share your organization and your mission?
Yes, and I actually will touch on that later on when we talk about early intervention. We are currently working with preschool programs. I don't know why I'm spacing up their names, but they reached out to us specifically for this reason. They said, they're struggling with families kind of not addressing the concerns that they are seeing, and they wanted me to come in and talk to them. So I am currently collaborating with one of the preschool programs in doing just that. I've done it. We went in and we talked about it, but we didn't really have families that were directly affected. So we're trying to figure out the best approach, because it is not an easy topic. I understand, and I think we really want to be sensitive to the concerns that families have. But so we're working together with preschools, because that ties into the early intervention that we will talk about later. But yes, so if you have any other recommendations, just let us know. But currently we are working with the Head Start program to go in and support families, either one-on-one or just have general presentations where we talk about the importance of getting that early intervention and screening and why that is important, that you do that early on. So that's the one-on-one support type of like, and the collaboration with other organizations that we do. Any other questions before we move on? So what is a disability and why is it important for us to understand it? I think, and I myself, you know, growing up had a very narrow understanding of what disability is, and that was really limited to the physical disabilities that we see around us. But disability is really broader than that. And the hope of this presentation is for us to get a better understanding of the scope of a disability and so that we could address it better. If we limit our understanding of disability, then it restricts us from what we can do because we're always just looking for one specific type. And when we don't see it, we think it doesn't exist. And so I think it's important for us to understand the disability at large, and then we can, as a community, talk about what we can do. So this is just a definition, and I don't think, because if I'm not presenting, it's hard to see the writing, correct?
Yes, we can see the big ones.
Okay. So let me try again. I really want you guys to benefit, and I apologize
Yeah, this
for
is good. Yep.
technical difficulties, but that is, let me see if it works. It doesn't. Okay.
This looks good now. I think we can. Mhm.
If I advance, it doesn't work, but let me just try. So disability in the dictionary, it says it's a physical, mental, cognitive kind of talking about, like if we're talking about learning disabilities and such, or a developmental delay that impairs or interferes with a person's ability to do a daily task. So it says certain tasks, but it's like a daily activities that we normally do. So if you think about your day-to-day activities from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, those are things that pose a challenge when someone has a disability, one disability or another. And we'll talk about the types of disabilities. But when we say someone has a disability, it means that that disability is interfering with their ability to do their daily tasks on a regular basis. It could be a daily basis, it could be, but it has to be maybe like majority of the time in a week span. So 3 to 4 times a week is kind of what we use when we do assessments. For example, families, we say, what supports do you need to complete this task? On a 7-day period, how many times did you need support with this? And what really triggers it if the supports were needed like more than 3 times a week, then that kind of triggers that this person needs support with this specific task. So it could be very minor, it can be major, but really what makes it a disability is because it is interfering with your ability to complete your day-to-day tasks. And then the American with the Disability Act defines it as a person who has a physical or a mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So it's kind of similar definition. And the person can also have a history or a record of such limitations. So that's when we say expand our knowledge of what disability is, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person also has to have it ongoing all the time. They could have had some treatments that improves their ability to complete their day-to-day activities, but they are still have a history and they still have this disability, and they could at any point need support, or it could resurface, like, not, I don't want to say resurface, but like they could have moments where this flares up, for a lack of a better word. And so don't think and that's one of the things that when we talk about language, which I will talk about later, is that, telling someone, oh, you don't look like you have a disability or things like that, we really need to move away from, because just because someone is not experiencing that at the moment does not mean their disability is invalid. So that's one of the things that we have to be aware of, is that disability, it's not stagnant, it changes, and it varies from person to person. And one person could go through different stages within their disability. And so that's really important for us to know. And again, as the definition says, disability can be physical, it can be mental, intellectual, or someone can have both physical and mental, intellectual disabilities as well. The one that I mostly work with are people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities like Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy. So disabilities that they are born with or are diagnosed earlier on in life, and it is expected to be lifelong. That is the population that we mainly work with. But it's important for us when it comes to advocacy that we are advocating for anybody and everybody who has any type of a disability. So with the advocacy, it's full on, but with our specific services and support, we are mainly working with families who have children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I just wanted to clarify that. Just talking a little bit more about the types of disabilities. Got this from the Global Disability Rights Advocacy Organization website. If you wanted to, you can look it up, Global Disability Rights Now. They did a study, this was back in 2012, but know that these percentages have increased since then. But it's just to give people general idea of the types of disabilities there are. So we have most of the disability we see is physical disability. So people who have difficulty walking, using wheelchair or any type of assistance. And then other disabilities that are a little bit more hidden are the more intellectual disabilities, other mental disabilities, especially mental health. It's considered a disability because an extreme mental health condition can interfere with your ability to complete your day-to-day activities. So those are the types of like hidden disabilities we don't really see, but they are, and the ones that we mostly see are the physical disabilities. And people can have multiple disabilities at once as well. So that's like the type of disabilities. And what a disability is not, especially when it comes to the population that we support. A lot of times, unfortunately, there's a lot of focus on fixing the problem, curing the disability. And unfortunately, that's still around. And one of the things we do is educate parents on this disability, especially for intellectual developmental disabilities. It's not a disease, it's not an illness that can be cured. And I'm talking specifically about the lifelong disabilities that people have. There are treatments, medications to help manage, to help reduce symptoms, to help a person get through their day-to-day, but that's not a cure. And when we move away, and disability is always changing, medication and treatments help, but they don't cure. And one of the things that, and I mentioned here, is the social model versus the medical model. The reason why I bring this up is because the social model kind of focuses more on the society and the environment being the problem, and the medical model focuses more on the individual's disability being the issue, more like it's more medical related, and they focus more on the treatments, and that is what we as a community mostly focus on, is the medical model of disability. We want to fix it, we want to cure it. Our advice and conversations is mostly focused on how do you fix the problem, and we don't really focus on the social aspect and the challenges and the difficulty we are creating as a society for people to live with their disabilities. And that's what our focus is. And something I actually, a disclaimer I forgot to mention early on, I will mention, is like, I don't give medical advice or anything related to the medical field. There are specialists that do that. So our approach is not really medical based, it's more of social based. And so that's why we're really big on changing our environment and our society and our community at large about our discussion of disability, and not so much focused on treatments and fixing. So I will just put that disclaimer. I'm not a medical professional, and so I do not offer medical advice or anything related to that, but we do support you in working with your medical professional to make sure that you're getting the supports and the services that you need, and your medical professional understands your child's needs. And so we will support you in advocating for you in those fields, but we personally don't offer medical advice. But when it comes to the social part of it, that's where we lean in heavily, because we want to change the environment around you so that you can, with your child, participate in their life, in their communities, to the full extent possible. So we're really big on the social, and we're big on the social being the issue here that we want to fix. But I wanted to just bring to people's awareness that we have these two different approaches, and we have, as a community, have been neglecting the second part. I think together they work well, and they create that balance that we need. But if we just focus on one and neglect the other, we're not creating that well-rounded support that the individuals with the disability need. So for so long, we've focused so much on the medical model and telling families, like, do this, do that, take this, take that. And that has really created more barriers and challenges than it has fixed anything. And so we want to bring in that, we want to focus in, like I said, the social aspect, and creating that more accessibility for our families. And when I say accessibility and inclusion, and I mean, like, if you just take your typical settings, for example, community settings I like to use. When you go somewhere, if you don't have a child or anybody, if you're not caring for anybody with a disability, you're just going about your day, and you go to, let's say, a community center, do you ever stop to think, is this place accessible for families or children that with disabilities to come and also be a part of whatever activity is taking place? And a lot of the times we don't think about that. We don't think about something as simple as, is the door accessible? Are the bathrooms accessible? Are there ramps for people with wheelchair? Are people even aware, like, these needs are, that the community has this needs? Are they even aware of it? And then if you have a child, with a disability, do they have programs that they're participating in, like other children? So any activities that you can think of that you take to your child, think about families who have children with disabilities. Can they also come and participate in these activities? So that's when we say accessibility and inclusion, that's just what we're thinking about, is like your day-to-day activities. Is it accessible to everybody? And if not, that's where we need to work on. And so that is where, again, we are focusing, is moving away from the medical models, working together with the medical model, but really shifting our focus to fixing our environments and our societies at large. So just before I move on, so why does this matter? So this is where we'll have a bit of a discussion. All right. I touched a bit about, why this matters, but let's have a little bit of a discussion and you can unmute. But just think about if you don't have someone with this, if you don't have a child or, and I like to hear from people right now, people who don't have somebody who don't care for somebody with a disability or don't really interact. I want to hear from them really quick. Sorry, I'm just, as I navigate this thing, bear with me. I will just open the floor to kind of just have a discussion about how do you interact with people with disabilities in your life, and are you even exposed to them? Anybody kind of here on this session just here not really interact with people with disabilities? Any kind of disabilities, really. I will share, like, before I even got into this field, for example, I used to have a neighbor kid who had Down syndrome, and I knew nothing about Down syndrome, and if you know people with Down syndromes, they have different futures and such, and so for me as a child, I had no idea what condition this person had, and he was a kid just walking around the streets like everyone else, but because he looked different, I was scared. And because I was scared, instead of asking questions about it, I just avoided being anywhere around him. And so the lack of education and awareness led me to be fearful, which is one of the things that we have, is we fear talking about disability. We fear disability itself, the word itself. We don't really want to talk about it because we don't understand it. Honestly, that's what it comes down to, is because lack of education makes us fear things. But once we understand and we know, then we're less fearful. So for me, growing up, seeing this child who was just like any other child, like myself, being around, being outside, walking, but didn't have any friends. I don't know if he had any friends, but due to my lack of education, I never interacted with them. And we see that a lot in our schools. Children, how many of your kids, if you have kids, have other children with disabilities who have either autism or Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, or, like, a lot of times I grew up this way, and I see it also now, is even going through the school system, is a lot of our kids don't interact with other children. So then how are they supposed to know? How are they supposed to be inclusive? And so as adults, it is up to us. And unfortunately, the school system fails to do this as well, because they segregate kids a lot of the times. And that's one of the fears that parents have, is that if my child is diagnosed, are they going to be removed from the general education, and are they going to be removed from interacting with other kids? And that's something we talk through families about, and you have a lot more power and a lot more say than you think. But because we have this fear, we stay away from it. And then fast forward, even as an adult, I had a neighbor who had a child with autism, and they had a lot of behaviors, and nobody wanted to interact with them because we didn't know how to interact with them. And so it was really tough. And so this, for me, these experiences is really what drives me to make sure that our communities are educated and that the kids have the same accessibility and the same interaction and the same, involvement as anybody else, because they are like everybody else. So how do we break that barrier? What has been your experience, and how have you tried to tackle that topic in the community at large? Is anybody trying to type in the chat? Sorry.
Yes, I believe Marina had a really great question. She asked, is autism genetic?
So just going back to my disclaimer, medical disclaimer, we don't offer that type of answer, because that's really a medical question. But in my experience in talking to people and working with people with autism, a lot of the times, autism is one of the things that is still under it's still there's a lot of research happening with it. So not to say that it's not genetically related, but at the same time, I really don't have that expertise to answer that question. I'm sorry. But that's why we put the disclaimer. But I think one of the things that people usually fear is that it's been passed down, right? But then if you look at families who have children with autism, it's usually just one or two, and there's no history in the family. So yeah, autism is one of those really, really complicated complicated disabilities, really. And there's still a lot of research happening around that. But so not answering your question, but answering in a way, yeah, that's a topic of discussion that continues to be a topic of discussion. Okay, so if I want to know, like, what do you think? Why do you think disability is a taboo in our community? Let's ask that. And don't be shy. Like, I am very, very shy in presenting, and I'm here presenting in front of all of you guys, and I can't see you. So if I can be here talking, someone else can come up and talk. Yeah. Why has it been a taboo for so long? Like, why is it not a regular conversation that we have? Why is it that our elders, every time we bring up the topic, it's like, hush, hush, let them deal with it? Why is it that every time families bring a child to the masjid, for example, if there's an event, they get a lot of just stares and, people just talking behind their back instead of talking to them? Why is that still a taboo, or is it still a taboo? I mean, to me, because I'm in this field and this is my day-to-day job, it's not a taboo in my world, but I know that it still is, because a lot of families are still fearful in getting a diagnosis for their children because of this. I think media influence. In what way, Lisa?
Sorry, I was looking for my unmute button. In what way? Just like the stories that are published, or the pathway to even get a story published and out to many readers, right? And then just like television media, movie media, and how we are exposed to that, and the books that are the pathway to get the books into the schools. Like, what are we reading, right?
That's true.
Basically as a foundation.
Yeah, that's true. But I also want to hear about just our community as like our community in general too. Why do we think that? Why is it embarrassing?
Thank you, Taylor. Yeah.
Like, these are questions we have to ask ourselves. Like, we can put words out, like, you know, saying it's embarrassing and fearful, like, you know, but why?
I feel like what you said earlier, coupled with a lot of other things, like not having the education, being embarrassed because you don't want your child to be perceived as abnormal because we think everyone else is, you know, normal. So I don't want my kid to be looked at differently. And also just not wanting to be like the person with the disabled kid, you know, so it's easy to go home and hide and not deal with the questions because you don't want to be that, you know, yeah.
Exactly. And you said the word that I was looking for is lack of education. You know, we feel embarrassed, we feel insecure, we don't want to deal with this and we don't want to deal with that because of what other people think. But those people don't know any more than you do. And the other thing is that nobody guarantees anybody that they won't deal with a disability themselves or within their families. And I'm not, the reason why, like, for me, this is where I get a little bit more passionate, because we don't ask ourselves those questions why. We just accept what we are told and what we are, you know, given, but we don't ask why. And it's the reason, and when we start asking why, that's when we start breaking down these barriers. And so for me, the why is what led me to where I am right now and doing the work that I'm doing. Is why is this happening? Why is this okay? Why can't my cousin come and be a part of, you know, the Eid gatherings that we all go to? Why can't my aunt, you know, take her son everywhere she wants to go, like she did with all her other children? Why? So it's asking these questions that led me to where I am. So I appreciate the response you guys are giving, which is what kept us for so long to accept this topic as being a taboo. But now we have to start asking ourselves, why should I be embarrassed? What is wrong with my child? You know, why can't my child have, you know, after school activities or go to this game or participate in this? You know, it's when we start challenging, then we can start working towards the inclusion that we are talking about. Is when we don't, then nothing changes. And a lot of times, and I will put a disclosure out there, I don't have a child, and I don't have a child with a disability. I don't care for a loved one directly with a disability. But why should I wait until I have a child myself or I have a loved one myself in order for this to be important to me? You know, it is important to me. It is important enough that someone in my community doesn't have the same access as I do. It's important enough for me that they do, that I step up to do something about it. So when we are proactive and when we're not coming from a place of, well, it's affecting me now, so I have to do something about it. So now our emotions are, we're much more, we get much more exhausted and burned out very easily because you have to care for your child or your loved one than when you don't have that direct. So for me, it is important that we start being more proactive instead of reactive, instead of waiting for something to happen to us in order for us to do something about it. And so that is why, as a community at large, we can do more than we think. And you don't have to be directly impacted. We all have know somebody who has somebody with a disability. We've all been through school with people with disabilities. We just looked the other way because it wasn't directly impacting us. And because of that, now we see the gaps in our communities. So that is why, like, these discussions that we want to have is why is this still a taboo? It needs to not be a taboo. Disability is not a word we should run away from. It should be in our daily conversations, because if it's not us today, it could be us tomorrow. And so that we have to remove that fear, and we have to remove that it's not just disability, it's with everything in life. I know that we worry about what other people think, but this topic in general, because it affects so many of us. Disability is the people with disability are the largest minorities. Yeah, so just think about that. And one of the statement that someone once said, is just, changed my perspective, is that we're all just one accident away from becoming disabled ourselves. So the more you know, and the more knowledge you empower yourself with, the less fear you have of anything happening. Because if something happens, God forbid, you are aware, you know where to go, you know where to get the resources. And that's what we want to give people, is that power to be able to say, yeah, I know where to go. I know what my rights are. And people with disabilities have the same rights as everybody else. It's just that their rights are not enforced like everybody else. Right. So I'm sorry, but I can talk forever about that. So I understand, like, it's not the easiest thing, but it's time we start breaking down those barriers. So like I said, as a community, we can do more. And I just talked about that a little bit. But the first thing is building awareness. If we don't know that there's a problem, then we're not going to do anything about it. So having these types of conversations, these types of workshops, is building that awareness. Like, hey, you just look around, like, within your neighborhood, there is going to be somebody with a disability there. Do you know them? Do you talk to them? Do you understand, their disability? Get to know them a little bit more. Educating ourselves and spreading awareness is the first step to addressing the disparities that we have. Language, paying attention to what we say and how we talk about disability. For a very long time, we have accepted terms and labeling people because of their disability, and that's not okay. So we have to change our language and the way we talk about, people with disability. Just use what I like to do, and where we are been, working in this field for a long time, been embedded, like we've been taught, and things change, is that use a person first language, like see the person first before you see their disability. And a lot of times we don't do that. And so if you just shift that and just say, hey, this is a person and this is a disability they have. So I'm going to know who they are, and I'm going to understand their disability a little bit better so that I can support them in any way that I can, especially if you are in the education field, or if you're in a community organization providing services to the community. You're supposed to provide services to everybody in the community. And so if someone walks through your door and they have a disability and they need some accommodations, can you provide that? And if not, then it's time we start assessing our organizations and what we provide. And then the community, it's all integrated, but we have to start with ourselves first, and then we can move towards what we can do in our community. So where do you have influence? Where are the places that you go, and where are the places that you can voice your concerns and start making changes? But also bring the families with you. We don't try to talk on behalf of families. We want them to talk for themselves. But sometimes at the beginning, they might not feel comfortable. That's fine. They come along. they are they are a part of the conversation, and sooner or later you will see that shift. Because the reason why they don't speak sometimes, like Taylor said, you know, they feel embarrassed or they feel like, you know, they're lesser than, but that's not how they should be made to feel. And so when they see someone else standing in support next to them, you will see that change very quickly. So don't shy away from asking questions. Don't shy away from asking helpful questions. It's okay to be curious. So when you know somebody or you have a neighbor or a friend, talk to them, understand. The goal isn't to, one second. We're not saying that you have to know everything about disability before you interact with someone. No, you don't have to know anything, but you just have to be willing to learn. So if you come across somebody or a family member or a relative or anything, all you have to say is like, hey, I understand your child has some disability. Tell me more about it. Let me understand so I can support you better. What can I help you with? That's as simple as that's all you need to do. You don't have to know what they have from the beginning. And so it's because we don't have those types of engagements with families that we see a lot of them just isolated and segregated from their communities. And so with the awareness, we start to bring more and more of families' voices back into the communities, and then have them be back and be part of their communities. I know I say communities a lot, but that's what we are. We are a community. Everything we do, I mean, we just came out of Ramadan, and that was all about community, coming together as a community, doing, you know, having iftars together, staying up all night together. And that's, you know, one of the biggest things is like families with children, they don't get to come out and do that together as a family. They might have to take turns, but they don't do that as a family. And so those are just the things that they are missing out, and we're not even thinking about it. And so if you're that neighbor, if you're that friend, start having those conversations, and we're here to support if you need some tips. But honestly, it's like I said, it's just a matter of saying, you know, what help me understand and what can I support you with? That goes a long way, a lot more than we think. And so that is kind of a general overview of moving away from the taboo and the stigma of a disability and understanding what it is, which is a lot broader than we think. Yeah, and then how we can start as a community, start having these conversations. So I wanted to just give that an overview so that you can walk away from this and feel like this is not a topic I need to be afraid of talking about. It's a whole lot. There's a lot of, you know, we have a whole lot of populations in our community. We have the elders, we just have people who have, you know, general disabilities, and we have people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So there's a whole array of disability, but our job is to just be aware and be open and be that voice that steps forward when needed. So that is what I wanted to present this first part of our presentation. And I would like to pause and ask if anybody has any questions before we move to give just a general general information. If you are a parent, or if you know a parent who has a child who may have some type of a disability, and we'll focus specifically on that, what you can do, and so we can support you with that as well. But before we shift to that, anybody have any questions?
There's one in the chat box. Can you see okay, or you want me to read it?
Community is where it's at. Yes, Taylor. I'm big on that. If you're a parent So we will talk about that, Elias, if that's the name. And then it was Taylor. Okay. So if you're a parent who's afraid of being judged for their children's diagnosis, what happens to the child who's struggling in school? So that's what we're gonna shift to. So early intervention. So early intervention is when you notice that your child is and then the school will tell you this too. If it's a good teachers will tell you this. If your child is struggling in school with any areas of learning, and they also see other behaviors as well, the school will mention this to you. They will let, and this is one of the reasons why we partnered up with early education program, is because they see this and then they tell the parents, and then the parents say, no, there's nothing wrong with my child, because they're afraid of what might be if the child gets diagnosed, like Elias was mentioning. So you're thinking about what happens if my child is diagnosed with this, and now we are worried about what others might say. We're not focused. Your child is your priority, and we know that you love your child and you want them to succeed, but focusing on what that might mean and what others might say will not help your child improve any better if they don't have a diagnosis to help address their challenges. And so the schools are struggling with right now is getting a child evaluated so that they can get a diagnosis and they can be helped with what they need support with. And so because we are worried about what might happen, we are causing more harm to the child and their development as well. So just very quickly, going back to the statistics earlier on, and this number has risen. But these are the different areas that children are getting special education supports in. So these numbers have risen since 2012, actually. So right now, of all the children, millions of children in ages between 6 to 21, which is usually from kindergarten all the way to grade 12. So people can be in school like up to 21. So if they are behind, they can get free education until 21, and then they have to transition out. And so it said that it was about 5.7 million, but really it's higher than that now, of children are receiving special education under the IDEA program, which is basically Individual with Disabilities Education Act, which is a law that provides free education to children with disabilities with the special education services that they need to be able to get the right supports in the school. So this diagram is just the areas that kids are receiving special educations in. So kids who have developmental delays, kids who have traumatic brain injuries through an accident or through birth. You have a lot of people that have specific learning disabilities, dyslexia, if I'm saying that right. So those types of disabilities, again, those are hidden disabilities that people don't usually consider a disability. So kids who have ADHD, so like a lot of times they're just like, oh, they're acting out or they have a behavior, but really once they're evaluated, they could really hone in on, oh yeah, this is really like a challenge and not just a child acting out. And so these are just different areas that kids are getting special education in, and it varies for everybody depending on their level of need. So a lot of the kids who have a learning disability, it's not really in every single subject. You could have kids who are excelling in math but struggling in reading and history. You can have kids who are, so don't think that it's all or nothing. And that is what the evaluation does. It assesses what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and then the individualized education plan, if they are found to be eligible, will work with them on becoming better in the areas of their weaknesses. It is not to make the child even fall even further behind, but is to help them with the areas. And so that is why it is important that when you are talking to your child's teacher, especially it's great if you can catch this when they are in preschool, but because the longer you wait, the harder it becomes, because the child will continue to fall behind. It'll be harder for them to catch up. So if your teacher if they come to you in preschool and say, hey, we think, your child might have some challenges, and so get evaluated right away, because your priority is to make sure that your child does not fall behind. And if they are behind, that they catch up as soon as possible. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have, a diagnosis like, autism or ADHD or something like that. It just might mean that they're struggling with certain things and a specific thing. And that's the only thing that could be addressed. If your child is showing symptoms of, for example, autism, ADHD, things like that, again, the earlier you can get these evaluations, the better it is for your child. And so it's really important you collaborate with your teachers, you work with your teachers, because they're the first people who know this. Like, they work with a lot of children, so they know. And it's not to say that they know everything and they're right. I know there is a lot of challenges in the school system, especially when it comes to children of color. Families of color face a lot of they do face discrimination and bias. And so that's why it's even more important that as soon as you get a hint of something being wrong, whether you bring it up or your teacher brings it up, get that evaluation, because the most you could do is just maybe rule these things out. And then if you need to talk to the teacher, talk to your child's doctor. Their primary doctor is not usually a specialist. They're just a family medical doctor. They're just your typical general doctor. What you need to do is get a referral for a specialist to evaluate your child, either for any behaviors like ADHD or autism. That's what you want. Don't settle for their primary doctor's response or advice if you know your child better than anybody else. So all you have to do is ask your doctor for a referral to a psychologist or a specialist who can diagnose your child. Don't be afraid of a diagnosis, because diagnosis is not the end of the world for your child. It is just the beginning. So having a diagnosis means that now you know what your child's challenges is, and now you can address it. Without a diagnosis, it is very hard to address or get the supports that you need in place. With a diagnosis, you can get access to the special education services that your child needs to get caught up and progress. So when we hear families and you can always get a second opinion. There's nothing wrong with getting a second opinion. I know there's it's a long wait list out there to get diagnosis. We're talking like 1 year, 2 year, even more. So it is going to be hard to get a second opinion. But even that first diagnosis is going to help you get some access to services until you get a second opinion. What I would advise is that don't get a second opinion in hopes of being told that there's nothing wrong with your child, because medical professionals could also be wrong. So your job is, something is, especially if you have multiple children, but you know when something is not right with your child, and so go with your gut instinct is what I would say. If that second opinion makes you feel more at ease or more reassured, go for it. But without a diagnosis, you are causing more hindrance to your child. It's going to be more challenging once they go through the school, because the school system doesn't hold children back. They will continue going from grade school to grade level with the same with no progression, even if they don't, because they are required at some point by 21, the child has to leave. So they will just push the child, and the child will continue to fall behind, not be at the same grade level. So don't let the fear of what ifs, don't let the fear of a diagnosis hold you back from getting your child diagnosis. And the people that make you feel embarrassed or make you, feel any type of way, they're not going to be the ones to help you with your child's needs. So I know it's easier said than done, but they really are not. At the end of the day, you're going to be the one responsible for your child's welfare. So I know that's not really the best, it might not be the best answer, but there is no best answer when it comes to what's best for your child. And then in the school, let's say your child has a diagnosis, I think that was your second part, judge for your child's diagnosis. Don't worry about that. In the long run, that's not really what's going to matter. What's going to matter is your child's well-being and their education. And then the second part of what happens to your child who's struggling in school. So once your child has a diagnosis and they're found to need a special education support, that is where it's important for you to be involved in everything that's going on. So the first thing is, once you get an evaluation, you will have a meeting with all the professionals in school that are involved. So the teachers, the principal, all the therapists that are working in the school. So like the speech therapist, the occupational therapist, all of those will be involved depending on what your child needs. So it's really important for you to prioritize those meetings. And so you will have the individual education plan meeting to discuss the results of the evaluation and the areas that your child needs support in, and how the school is going to support you in doing that. The school is not perfect. The less involved you are, the less they will do for your child. They will literally just say, okay, here's the report. This is what we have to do. Whether or not they are required to produce a progress report quarterly. And so they will do that, but whether or not your child is going to make a progress is going to be up to the extent that you're involved in. So when you see progress report after progress report and your child is not making progress, then you have to address that. And so you have as many meetings as you want, as many you can relook at the IEP as many times as you request, and those are your legal rights. And that's the one thing that a lot of families don't realize, is what their legal rights are. Is you have right to make sure that if you don't agree with anything, you have a right to appeal those decisions. It is a pressuring process where and this is what I would advise, is when you go into these meetings, don't go into it alone. Always have somebody with you, whether it's a family member or an advocate or a friend. Always take somebody with you when you go into these meetings, because they can be stressful. I go into these meetings with families and I sometimes get like stressed, like and so I can only imagine when it's your child being discussed and they want to rush things through because they only have certain time. If you're not comfortable with anything, don't sign anything. say, I will review it, I will come back. And if you see a challenge with your child and the school is saying they don't see it, trust your instinct. Don't give up on that, push it. So because at the end of the day, what matters to you is your child. Other people, no matter, even if they're professionals, they have limitations. You know your child better. So the diagnosis will help you understand what your child needs. It should not make you afraid of what could happen. So that's kind of part of the presentation. His question is part of the presentation. And so I'm glad we're able to answer that. If you have additional questions, let me know. But early intervention, if your child is in, preschool and that comes up, address it right away before they go into the regular school system, like kindergarten. It's going to be really hard. But it doesn't mean that you can't, but you can, is just now your child is now at a grade level. And it's going to be a little bit slower than if you did it when they are in preschool, because when they are between the ages of, certain ages in the child phase, they're eligible for certain programs. And so once they age out, they no longer have access to those. And so you have to access it through the school system. And there's a whole ordeal with that. So at every stage that something is, like, for example, autism, that's usually diagnosed really early, like 18 months, maybe earlier than that. Now right away your child could be eligible for the birth to 3 program. You want to get them in there. And then after they go into preschool, you already know what your child needs. And so the earlier, the better is what I would say when it comes to if you're a parent who's dealing with this and don't know what route to take. We highly encourage you to get evaluation, get a diagnosis. And if you need someone to talk it through, that's what we're here for. We're not here to just do the paperwork, but we're also here to help you talk through these challenges, these societal challenges that you face. And it's okay. I'm not saying that, it's not okay for you to feel those things or feel those ways, but we can't let that hold us back from doing what's important for the child. And so if you don't have anybody else to talk to about, that's what we're here for. A lot of times when we meet with family, we spend a good time at our first sessions just debriefing about all these concerns we have as a community, they have as a parent, the concerns that they have. We don't offer, we're not counselors, but we do counsel, if that makes sense. And that is important. Like, we want to make sure that families can let those fears go in a safe place so that they can go do what they need to do for their child. Okay. And so I like to leave the last part for questions and answers, but I will just leave it by saying that when we're all involved, we can really make a difference. Like, whether you have a child or somebody with a disability, we all have a role to play. And that role can be as simple as just, if you see something, say something. I know that's not my quote, but that applies here too. If you see someone being pushed away from somewhere because of their disability, say something. If you are in your community and you see that, you're missing some family members because they can't bring their child, say something so that next time they can be a part of it. Yeah. So it's just that's how we make the changes that we're looking towards making, inshallah. And with that, I will open the floor for questions. You can type it, or if you want to unmute, you can unmute. And I apologize for my presentation just being all over, but I hope that was helpful, inshallah.
That was so amazing and fruitful. Thank you so much, Ummi. really learned a lot. Yeah, thank you. Guys, you've been so great about asking questions and leaving comments. Please keep them coming.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the chat. If I missed anything.
Yes. Yeah. I just wanted to drive a point home that you mentioned, Omi, about the what do you call it? Hidden disabilities, you call it, especially the intellectual disabilities. A lot of the families, I'm really involved with my kids' schools. A lot of the families seems like they don't know like about the accommodations, the IEPs, the 504 plans, because they're kind of like, they don't want to, like, goes back to that stigma, like they don't want to know, and the kid could be further down, like long term. It has long-term implications. I just want to let families know that there are accommodations, like you mentioned, at school, even way into college, like for these kind of hidden disabilities, like they're in place, but we don't know about them. So a lot of times it's not the minorities that are taking advantage of this, because our communities, consider disabilities as stigma and so much around it, but it's, like white people and other people who are taking advantage of these things. And you have even up to college, like, longer testing time, a room by yourself from distractions, because a lot of us struggle with test anxiety, I'm sure. And so that also can be a form of learning disability. So just know that if you don't ask for it, if you don't inquire about it, you're not going to know about it, and your kid's going to suffer at every stage because of that. And also you're teaching your kids to advocate for themselves. So like if they're in college and they see you doing that at a young age, so they're going to stand up and seek those services themselves as well.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for mentioning that. A lot of the things that that are out there, our families, our communities are not aware of, because they're still struggling with that first stage, the acceptance, the just getting the diagnosis, advocating within, the early school system. And so when they're exhausted from that, sometimes families don't even think there's something after high school. And that is one of the things that got me involved at the beginning was because I work mainly with adults. I really wanted to support families who have adults with a disability who graduate high school. And then it's like, now what? What about higher education? What about employment? What about just day activities because you can't keep your child at home all day. Nobody wants to be at home all day. You and I would not put up with that. So why do you think your child with a disability would be okay with that? So, and then that also leads to behaviors. So a lot of times if people are, especially if you can't verbally communicate, that translates to behavior because they want to communicate their need. And if they can't do that verbally, it translates to having like physical behaviors. And then we think that is just now you're acting up and it becomes more of a challenge, but it's your child communicating with you. Communication is not just verbal. It's not just words coming out. It comes in so many different forms as well. And so if you don't know if you're not involved ahead of time, then it'll be harder later on to access those supports that are available, and they're there. And a lot of times, like you said, our communities of color, in general, communities of color, but mostly immigrants, and are the ones that are left behind. And that's what we're here to support with. That's one of the main things, is making sure you understand the services that are available to your child, and even to you as a caregiver, as a primary caregiver. It doesn't really all have to be on you. So that's one of the things, is we give parents those resources. I can send you a list of clinics that do evaluations, that do diagnosis, if you are able to share that with anybody who's interested. But schools, really, really important, right? Because that's where your kids are majority of the time. But yeah, there's a lot of accommodations in place. unfortunately, sometimes you might be told your child doesn't qualify. But that is where the advocacy comes in. That is where making sure you have the right evaluation. If the evaluation isn't addressing your concerns, ask for another one, get a second opinion. And those are things our parents have a hard time doing, like, you know, other communities, like they're really good about pushing. But we grew up in a mentality where we trust authority to the point where we don't realize when they're really just not coming from a place of care. If that makes sense. Yeah. Camila has her hand raised.
Thank you, Umi, and thank you, GPS, for doing this presentation today. I just wanted to add to what Umi said, that it's very important for parents to have involvement in especially like the IEP process. I used to be a school social worker. I mean, I am a social worker, but in the past I did work like in school social work. And one time we had a child that was African American, and I felt like in a room full of like 9 people, like I was the only person that was there to speak on behalf of that child. And the other people happened to be white people. And so in the school system, the children are usually isolated, and because of racial issues. Sorry, I was I'm breathing heavily. I'm like, I was doing some cleaning. And I'm nervous. And yeah, but I just wanted to say, like, it's very important that parents, you advocate for your child and you're there and being a part of that process, because I remember that child didn't have their parent there, and being the only other person of color, like I was the only one able to speak on their behalf. And sometimes you don't have that luxury of having like another person of color, like, being a professional and stepping in and speaking up for your child. But I would definitely, like Umi said, be a part of the process and make sure that your children are getting the services that they need. And also just being, accepting of your child's condition, like it's not the end of their life, is just the beginning of like a new life for them. So just kind of, keeping that in mind, like normalizing it for yourself as a parent first, and not like judging your child as well, because it starts with you before the outside world. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Jamila. Thank you, and for that insight as a social worker working in the school system, because a lot of times people don't know what's really happening in the school system, and so it really helps to hear from people in the field. It's very intimidating. Like Taylor said, go with a family or an advocate. You don't have to go with someone who even knows everything. Just go with like a friend who's maybe available, just so that you're not the only person at that table with 10 other professionals from the school and everybody's white and you're the only, I can't tell you, every time I go into these meetings, someone always comes and says, thank you for being here with the parent. And that's coming from the school professionals themselves. Like they'll say thank you, for coming and being like, because they know too how pressured parents get. And so don't go into it alone. That's what we're here for. If you're in King County, Seattle, just reach out to us, and we'll, go into these, especially first meetings with you guys. I usually do it most of the time. My partner is not able to, and I'm happy to. But yeah, that's where it starts. Once they see that you're not alone, the tones change. So thank you, Jamila, for that. Anybody else that wants to share their experience in the school system and have some advice? Because we do have a lot of families that have children in the school system. I do want to see adults, if you have adults as well, what they do after they graduate school. If you want to share that experience as well, that would be great. And others can also hear your insights as well. We have some time, I think. Don't be shy, but again, yeah, schools translate children of color, children with disabilities, and who are also children of color. Yeah, a lot of behaviors are a lot of behaviors that are happening because of a child's disability is translated as just behavior issues, and so many kids fall under the radar because of that. And unfortunately, we as a community accept that too. And so, how many of you ever seen a child, for example, it might be a child, we don't know the diagnosis, but having a behavior, and even you're a guest, or you're visiting somebody, or you're in a community gathering, and they'll say, oh yeah, they're just having they're just acting up, or they're just having a behavior issues and challenge, like we see that within our community, and we accept it. So that's really unfortunate, but that's where having the conversation and the discussion helps, so that we can say, no, that's not it.
Yeah, I have one example of a student that goes to elementary school that my kids go to. Like most mornings at drop off, she just has a really hard time. She's crying, she's clingy to her parents, and it seems like she's having like this physical pain just being in the classroom. And so I've seen that multiple times, and I spoke to I think the para educator who helps the teacher, and I'm like, is she okay? Is she getting the services that she needs, accommodations that she needs? And she's like, no, she's not, like, the parents are not asking for it, but we're trying to see if we can get something done. Apparently the kid has sensory issues in the classroom. And so I was at it, like, just keep pushing for it. I don't know what the status is right now. I mean, she does seem a lot better at drop-offs, but at one point I approached the vice principal, I approached the principal, and they said, we're working on it. So I don't know, I have to check in and make sure that she has those accommodations. But a lot of times, if your kid goes to an underserved community school, where the majority is marginalized communities, they don't have those resources again, and they're just going to tell you straight up, like, we can't afford to do those kind of things, which is unfortunate. But yeah, for people looking in from the outside, like you said, who don't have kids with disabilities, don't wait until you're affected by this issue, or until it's at your doorstep, but really go out of your comfort zone and confront the problem and ask, because that kid's future is literally on the line. So
It actually is, you mentioned something important, is that when a school tells you they don't have options, like they can't support your child with what their needs are, you have the option to switch your child to a different school. And it's actually really important, if you want the school to provide transportation to their new school, is that you get the school to in writing to say that they can provide it, and you can transfer your child to this other school, and they will have transportation. If they were getting transportation to the school, that they will have transportation, because the current school can't do what your child needs. And so your child does not have to be stuck in that school. You can transfer them, but don't do it without them approving it, because if you just pull your child out, then it is your responsibility to meet their transportation needs, which is big for a lot of our families who need transportation to school for their child. And so again, I'm not the only organization. There are other organizations as well, but for people of, especially, in our Somali communities and immigrant families and such, that is the family we mainly target, because the language barrier, cultural barrier, the stigma in general, like, I don't want anybody to know that my child needs this support. And it's like, that's the community we really hone in on, because we want to help them overcome those barriers within their community so that they can help their families, their child better. And so even though that's our target, we help everybody and anybody that comes to us, because at the end of the day, if you're facing a challenge, someone else is, it doesn't really, you face the same challenges. Every community is just that others have more resources available and services and organizations available without the language barrier. And so, yeah, so the school is a huge thing, it's a big thing, especially the beginning and the end of the school year. That's when we get most of the calls. So we will tell you, like, don't go into it alone. Know your options, know your rights. And at the end of the day, your child is the priority. And so get that. And if you need support with that, we're here for that, inshallah. So I don't want to take up any more of your time. I mean, if anybody has questions, they can reach out to us directly. Zainab GPS, thank you for inviting me and for allowing me to just, talk about this topic. And, just as, again, like I said, this is just really important to me, not because I care for somebody with a disability, but because I care for my community just as much. And so I want to see us progress as a community. And so that's what I love, seeing so many organizations and so many services coming from our community, like GPS, who's helping the underserved population deal with birth and birth challenges and complications, and in a way and in the language that they understand. And so something we've lacked for for so long, and it's time that we take charge of our community and take charge of what our community needs. And so this is just one part of it. And as GPS works with families, they will come across parents who have children with a disability. And so then they can send them off to someone else in their community who understands them to help. And I will do the same thing if they need support with other services that I can't provide, but someone else, like mental health, for example. We don't provide disability related to mental health, but I know, and I hope to see more of this, but people in our community helping with that area. And so for us to be able to just give our community what it needs is just so important, and this is just one part of it. And so thank you for bringing this conversation to your organization, and I look forward to just doing more collaboration and see how I can help you guys as well, with any families that help navigating this very complicated system. We will not undermine, like, it is a complicated system, but we're here to break it down for you based on what you need specifically, and not everything. That you don't need to know everything. So, and thank you everyone who attended and stayed on.
Yes,
I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And I usually do record this myself, but
yes.
since you do have it in recording, if I could get a copy for my record, that would be great as well.
Absolutely. Yep. I will send it your way. And also I will upload it to our YouTube channel, inshallah, God willing, for our members to rewatch, or the ones who missed, so they can watch the session. Thank you so much, Umi. Oh, an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I can't wait, like you said, to collaborate and just stay in touch, inshallah. And if for anyone who wants the slides or Umi's contact information, I will send that over with an email. And to our members, thank you so much for coming. You make these sessions happen. So without you, there's no session. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We will give you back 15 minutes of your Saturday. So thank you, everyone, for coming. And thank you, Umi, so much. Inshallah, I'll be in touch. Yeah. Okay.
Have a good one.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.